Erev Tov Rabotai, we're continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Peah. We're up to Perek Zayin Mishnah Vav. Now, Rabotai, the Mishnah is going to introduce to us several new concepts. We just fly through them quickly. Now, the way it works is that when you have a tree that produces fruits, the first 3 years you are not allowed to touch the fruits, eat from them, or benefit from them. They are what we know is called Ogla. You have to leave it there, let them fall. You cannot have any benefit from them. On the 4th year, you're allowed to start eating the fruits. It's called Rivai. However, you have to bring those fruits to Yerushalayim and eat it there. And if you cannot do that, then you have to redeem the fruits by exchanging its sanctity onto money, which you bring to Yerushalayim and use it to buy food to eat there. Now, the laws of Rivai are similar to the laws of Maaser Sheni. One of the ties you have to separate from produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael. We know Maaser Sheni, just as a way of a background, Maaser Sheni, during the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th years of the Shemitah cycle, you separate 10% from whatever's remaining after 2% of the Kohen, 10% of the Levi, you separate 10% as Maaser Sheni. You bring that produce to Yerushalayim and eat it there. If you cannot eat it there, you transfer the sanctity of that produce onto coins and use those coins to buy produce in Yerushalayim and eat it there. However, the Torah says if you want to go that route by transferring the sanctity onto coins, you have to add a chomish, a fifth of the total cost, meaning if you, let's say you have 4 shekel of produce, you add a fifth of the total, meaning 1 shekel, and thereby making the entire sum 5 shkalim to transfer the sanctity. And then what we have on the last day, on the day before Pesach of the year following each Maaser Ani cycle, the 4th and 7th year, we have what we call Biul Maasrot. You have to eliminate any tithes, meaning anything that's tevel, you have to tithe it, and then any Trumot and Maasrot have to be given to the proper recipients. Maaser Sheni, or the money that was used to redeem, you have to either properly use it or destroy it. The Mishnah now is going to have a machloket Bet Shammai Bet Hillel. We have some similarities regarding Rivai, the produce of the 4th year of fruits, in comparison to Maaser Sheni, but we want to see if certain laws also apply to both equally. Kerem Rivai, the 4th year produce of a vineyard, when you're allowed to start eating it. Bet Shammai say, en lo chomesh ven lo biur. You don't have to add a fifth of the total cost if you want to transfer sanctity onto coins and eat in Yerushalayim. You could transfer the exact amount, take it to Yerushalayim, and use it to buy produce there. Ven lo biur, it doesn't have the laws of removal. You don't have to destroy them or make sure that they were properly given. Bet Hillel say yesh lo, that it is subject to the laws of the 5th, adding the chomesh, and the laws of the removal. Because, just as a way of explaining it, Bet Shammai say, Afal pishet taun pidyon kemaser sheni, even though by the Rivai it requires transferring over the money if you cannot bring it to Yerushalayim, just like Maaser Sheni, ena baalim mosifim et chomesh, you don't have to add the 5th. Delo katva Torah b'chomesh, because the Torah does not write chomesh, a 5th, by Rivai. Ven lo biur, it has no biur. En lo chayav l'ba'aro min habayit be'erev Pesach shel Rit shel Shvit kim shemevaer ha'maasrot. You don't have to destroy it from the house on Erev Pesach on the 4th and 7th year, just like by the other Maasrot. Ki dichtiv ba'alti ha'kodesh min habayit. Like the pasuk says, generally I removed the kodesh from my house. This does not apply here according to Bet Shammai. U'Bet Hillel omrim, Bet Hillel say yesh lo, it has chomesh, the 5th. It has biur, the destroying, because they learn out kodesh from Maaser. Just like Maaser has a chomesh, a 5th, and you have to destroy it, so too the Kerem Rivai, the 4th year produce of the vineyard, has a chomesh and has biur, because it says sanctified, kodesh, gzera shava, both by the Rivai and by the Maaser Sheni. However, Bet Shammai lo yarfi kodesh Maaser, Bet Shammai do not want to learn this gzera shava, therefore they do not connect the Maaser Sheni with the Kerem Rivai. Now, the Mishnah discusses now, do you have to leave peret and olelet? The peret is the grapes that fall when you're picking off the cluster of grapes, the individual 1 or 2 grapes that fall. Olelet, we learned yesterday, is the undeveloped clusters. Do you have to leave that on the 4th year produce of the vineyard? Bet Shammai say, yesh lo peret, yesh lo olelot. The 4th year produce of the vineyard is subject to the laws of peret and the laws of olelet, just like the produce of any other year. Vanim podin atzmam, and the poor people who collect the peret and olelet of the 4th year vineyard must redeem it for themselves if they don't want to take it to Yerushalayim, just like every other person. Bet Hillel say kulo lagat, all that goes to the wine press, as a euphemism of saying the entire 4th year harvest, including the peret and olelet, belong to the owner. He can put all those grapes into the wine press to make them into wine without leaving any for the poor, and then he redeems the wine or takes it to Yerushalayim. Because Beit Hillel hold it's subject to the same laws just like Maaser Sheni, so do Rivai. And just like Maaser Sheni doesn't belong to the owner of the land, it's property of Hashem. And we know that property of Hashem is exempt from Peret and Olelet. So too here, by Kerem Rivai, Beit Hillel, say it's property of heaven, therefore it's exempt from any Peret or Olelet. The gifts are normally given to the poor, therefore you take it to Yerushalayim, you eat it there, or you redeem it there. That is the end, Rabotai, of Mishnah Vav. Mishnah Zayin discusses now continuing laws of Olelet. Kerem shekulo olelot. Let's say you have a vineyard that is entirely made of the undeveloped clusters. Every cluster in the vineyard has no shoulder, no dripping, like we said yesterday. It's all undeveloped. Rabbi Eliezer Omer leBaal Habayit. Rabbi Eliezer says everything belongs to the owner. Rabbi Akiva Omer leAnim. Rabbi Akiva says it belongs to the poor. And now they're going to debate their opinions. Amar Rabbi Eliezer says, Ki tivtzor lo te'olah. The Torah states when you harvest your vineyard, you are not allowed to take the olelet, the underdeveloped clusters, meaning there's a prohibition, according to Rabbi Eliezer, only when you harvest your vineyard, not to take the undeveloped clusters. Imen batzil minayin olelot. However, if there's nothing for you to harvest, meaning no cluster is fully developed, the entire vineyard is underdeveloped, where's the obligation of giving olelet come from? The Torah says when you harvest, leave olelet. But if I don't harvest, I have nothing to harvest, everything's underdeveloped. Rabbi Eliezer says you don't have to leave any olelet for the people. Because the Rav explains, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the minimum that is considered a harvest is 3 fully developed clusters which can produce a revi'it of wine. If it has less than this, then the owner can keep the olelet, according to Rabbi Eliezer. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, but Rabbi Akiva responded to Rabbi Eliezer, v'karmecha lo te'olel. The Torah says in Sefer Vayikra, you shall not take the olelet of your vineyard. It doesn't mention anything about harvesting. It doesn't say only when you harvest you cannot keep the olelet, but if you don't harvest you can keep it. Afilu kol olelot. It implies from the pasuk, even if the entire vineyard is made up just of underdeveloped clusters, you cannot teach them. You cannot keep them. You must give them for the poor. Imken, but the Mishnah asks on Rabbi Akiva, if it is true that you can never take olelet, even if it's your entire field, lama ne'emar ki tivtzor lo te'olel? Why does the Torah specifically say in Sefer Dvarim, when you harvest, don't take the olelet? Why say that? Just say, don't take olelet. Why do you have to say when you harvest? That implies like Rabbi Eliezer, only when there is a harvest. So the Mishnah answers, En na'anim be'olelot kodem habatzir. According to Rabbi Akiva, the Torah mentions the harvest to teach you another halacha, that the poor have no claim on the olelet before the time of harvest. Meaning, according to Rabbi Akiva, it's not teaching me ki tivtzor, when you harvest, leave the olelet, to say that if there's no harvest, you could keep it. It's teaching me that poor people cannot claim it until I'm ready to harvest it. Meaning, even if the owner has no fully developed clusters to harvest, the poor cannot take the olelet until the harvest season arrives. Even though the owner of the field is not harvesting anything, still they have to wait for the harvest season in order to take their olelet. And the Rav explains, how does Rabbi Eliezer learn the pasuk that Rabbi Akiva quotes, where it just says, "V'karmecha lo te'olel." It says, don't take the olelet. It doesn't mention anything about harvesting. Rabbi Eliezer will learn it, that it teaches us another halacha, that although the poor cannot take the olelet until the harvest, the owner cannot take it for himself before that time. Meaning, Rabbi Eliezer says, you're right, they have to wait till harvest, but the owner cannot touch it either. Even before you harvest, you are not allowed to touch it. So in some, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, they interpret the 2 psukim regarding olelet differently. The pasuk that says, "V'karmecha lo te'olel," just generally, you shall not take olelet of the vineyard. Rabbi Eliezer learns, you cannot take the olelet of the vineyard even before the time of harvest, even though the poor cannot take it yet. And Rabbi Akiva learns that pasuk as you cannot take the olelet of your vineyard regardless of if there is something to harvest or not. And the pasuk in Dvarim which says, Ki tivtzor lo te'olel, when you harvest, do not take it. Rabbi Eliezer learns, if you have something to harvest, then you can't take it. But if you have nothing to harvest, you keep it. Whereas Rabbi Akiva learns that at the time of harvest and no earlier, the poor people may take the olelet. Meaning, even if the owner has nothing to harvest, Ki tivtzor, nothing to harvest still, the poor people have to wait till Ki tivtzor, the time of the harvesting, in order to take the olelet that belongs to them. That is the end of today's Mishna Yomi, Rabotai. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen v'Amen.